Hello everyone, as you have now seen the gameplay footage of this build, I will now go over the details over the gear and why I have chosen what for this build and what the idea behind everything is. So the idea behind this character first of all was to make a somewhat budget character that you can progress heavily in maps with, and being able to just have fast gameplay, and I do like the Ranger class overall a lot, and the Raider Ascendancy can be a lot of fun as well, so I just wanted to build something around that. So the two main things that I would say is needed for the build, or the three main things that is needed for this build, is double tamings and then a Yoke of the Suffering. Now the Yoke of the Suffering increases the damage taken for each type of ailment that we have inflicted upon enemies, and our elemental damage can shock, and this also gives us a chance to shock. So with the taming rings we have a chance to freeze, shock and ignite, which adds damage from our yoke, aka freeze, shock and ignite are three different forms of ailments, so we do more damage with the yoke because of that. Also the yokes gives us a great chance to shock, and shock increases our damage very much. And then obviously the taming rings also gives us a chance to shock. Along with that, the taming rings also gave a very high amount of elemental resistances and overall elemental damage, which is very good for our build. Now we focus heavily with this build on playing cold on our elemental hit. So we do go with such things as hypothermia, and we go with cold penetration, and then of course elemental damage with attacks. So the reason why I chose the Hope Shredder is because it has a great amount of cold damage on this weapon, along with a slight amount of physical damage. So what the Hope Shredder also does is that the more frenzy charges we have, the more cold damage gets added. The more frenzy charges we have, the more movement speed we get, and we also get more attack damage leached as life. Another great thing about this bow is that it's very defensive and gives us a 2% chance to avoid elemental damage from hits per frenzy charge. So more frenzy charges equals more defensives as well. Now the downside of this bow obviously is that you take 200 cold damage per second per frenzy charge while moving, but if you have your assists high enough and you are using the survivalist node in the skill tree, the damage isn't really notable at all. It's only notable unless we've not hit a mob for a while. Like if we don't hit a mob and we are not leeching anything and you run like crazy, then yeah, you're gonna lose some HP. But we have a flask to counter that. Just hit the life flask whenever you need to regain some HP. Along with this, we also have the Hero's Ire due to its very high amount of cold damage added to our attacks. It has great evasion for our defensive as well, and 10% chance to dodge attack hits and spell hits. So this gives us even more defensives as well on top of that. Because we're playing the Raider Ascendancy, we have a lot of evade, and we have a lot of evasion, and we have a lot of dodge chance as well from different things in the game. So that's very good defensively and offensively for our build. I also chose the Dark Grey Vector's Dragon Scale boots due to the fact that they give us a maximum frenzy charge +1, which once again gives us more damage from the Hope Shredder, and more frenzy charges equals more damage, along with our Ascendancy choice as well, playing Raider, where we have evasion, movement speed, and attack damage per frenzy charge. And once again as well, more frenzy charges here on our bow also means more movement speed, more elemental damage avoid chance, more cold damage, and more leech. So a frenzy charge is very good for our build. Now along with that, these are currently corrupted with chance to dodge attack hits. I was just really lucky and just corrupted my own boots and managed to get these. This is not something that you have to go for, and it's pretty easily obtained anyway if you would want something like this, but just a normal pair of Dark Grey Vectors are very cheap, easy to get a hold of, and you don't need to corrupt them if you don't feel like it. Other than that, we're just using a Stygian Vice with life, resists, and elemental damage with attack skills. Nothing too crazy here, because I don't want to go too much over the budget, which is under 5x, which I had in mind for this character. I did not want to spend more than 5x, so just a normal nice Stygian Vice. And then we have a pair of grip gloves, because grip gloves give projectile attack damage as the implicit modifier, which gives her build a lot of damage. Then once again, I have life, fire, lightning resist just to balance my resists. Then I have crafted physical damage converted to cold damage, because this was a very major DPS increase for my build. I chose with this one as the enchant. Now, do keep in mind this one costs 1 divine, so do keep a lookout for gloves that can have an open prefix, and you can craft this with 1 divine. That's pretty cheap currently. I'm using the Starconja's head as well, just for overall extra life, good defensively because of all the evasion it gives, global crit chance that gives us more damage, and the attack speed. Just a really good head overall for most builds in the game, and it fits very well with our build because we get enough resists from all these sources. As the yoke also gives us resists, we get a lot of resists everywhere from our build, and we can easily just slap on a cheap Starconja's head for even more damage, more life, more defensives. Now, I don't have anything special enchanted because I do not want to go over my budget, and I'm not going to do any form of Uberlab myself because I think they're very boring. And the last piece of our build is just a very simple drill neck penetrating arrow quiver. It's cheap, it's really good for our build. It increases damage with hits and ailments to targets they pierce. We pierce basically everything. Attack speed, life, evasion, physical damage to bow attacks, and we scale that physical damage into cold as well. It's a really cheap and great quiver for this purpose. In flask choices, I just have a Quicksilver with movement speed and stuff. You don't need a specific one, just have any Quicksilver as you like. I have a Wise Oak because the Wise Oak gives us damage depending on which resistance is the highest. It gives us damage by penetrating the resist of the highest resist that we have. Now, if we look at defenses, I actually have cold as my lowest, so this will actually not give cold penetration. But if I use this with the Taste of Hate Sapphire Flask that gives me cold resistance as well, then we will push our cold res to be the highest, and then I can use the Wise Oak. Cold res is the highest if I use them at both at the same time, which will utilize the Wise Oak to give more cold penetration damage for our build. And then I have a Diamond Flask with warding on it, just because warding is very good defensively and nice against temple chain maps. And the Diamond Flask gives us DPS with the critical strike chances lucky, and then just a pretty normal life flask with anti-bleed on it. And this one is actually pretty nice because we get a 20% chance to gain flash charge when you deal a critical strike. We deal a lot of critical strikes due to our crit build, and it's very nice because then we can have a lot of uptime on our life flask here, which is needed for the Hope Shredder, as I mentioned earlier. Now, in terms of jewels, I have gone with a life, cold damage to bow attacks, and an onslaught jewel. In the Stygian device, nothing too special. You just mainly want to go for life and cold damage attacks. Have onslaught or whatever you want if you feel like it. In the skill tree, we are using a combat focus Viridian Jewel because we want to get rid of the lightning damage that the elemental hit gem can perform. So we completely block out lightning damage. And then we also have, where is it now? Over here, yes. We also have a combat focus Cobalt Jewel, so we block out the fire from the elemental hit and we focus only on cold. So you will need these two jewels mainly for this build, and they need to be socketed in certain areas like these, so they properly work for our build and they block out the fire and lightning damage, so we only do cold damage instead. Then I have a Lionized Fall Viridian Jewel because what this jewel does is that it transforms all the melee and melee weapon type modifiers in a radius are transformed to bow instead. So that's why I have Soul Raker and all these skill points here, is that they do no longer apply to claws, they apply to our bows actually. So you can see our Soul Raker damage with bows and stuff like that, and damage with bows. And that's why I'm also currently going for From the Shadows. I just need 2 more skill points to get that. That is a very heavy DPS increase as well. And then I just have an Intuitive Leap Viridian Jewel. Just nice to be able to get a hold of Survivalist, Heartseeker, Acuity, and Herbalism. Very cheap skill points wise, you know, like we're saving up a lot of skill points here by having this intuitive leap that we can put into other things as life nodes and, you know, all the way to face acrobatics and stuff like that, and getting from the shadows and so on. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention about this build as well that I just remembered is that, remember when I said that we freeze, shock, and ignite and all those things, and that increases our damage from the yoke? Well, if you read here on the elemental hit, it says at the bottom, 10% more damage per elemental ailment on the enemy. So this actually performs very well with elemental hit overall, and is one of the main reasons why I have went with these choices for the build, is that it scales very good with elemental hit, scales very good with the yoke, adds a lot of resist so we can figure out the rest of the build very easily. And as I said, this is basically a build that I spent about 4 Exiles on so far, and I think most of these items have actually dropped in price, so this is probably a much easier build to get a hold of if you want to try it out. Now, next up, I want to talk about our gem setup and why I chose what gems. First of all, we have the elemental hit, of course. I am currently using a level 19 because I haven't really put too much effort into leveling these gems or buying, you know, 2020 gems or such things, as I'm trying to conserve on my budget here. So yeah, just elemental hit. We link that with hypothermia for the chance to chill, freeze the effect of that, and more damage with hits and ailments against chilled enemies means that we do a ton more damage because we chill almost all enemies, including even bosses. I recently swapped over to Mirage Archer instead of using Ice Bite. I feel like this is much better DPS wise and helps us with boss kills as well, because the Mirage Archer will have uptime while we're running around dodging spells and such. Then I have elemental damage with attacks just because it does a ton of elemental damage. And then greater multiple projectile support for map clearing. Now do keep in mind, I do make a gem swap from the cold penetration like this. I swap out greater multiple projectiles to cold penetration for bosses because I'm currently only using a 5 link, as I said that this build is a very budget build. I'm only using a 5 link, but I can easily do tier 16 maps including bosses without any problem, so it works very fine with a 5 link to do this gem swap for bosses and map clearing. And if you can afford a 6 link, then hallelujah, you're in DPS heaven basically. Other gems that I've went with is Blink Arrow, fast attack, so we blink arrow quicker, also have dash in there, and then I have Culling Strike, because if we have Blink Arrow linked to Culling Strike, then we will make a clone of ourselves when we Blink Arrow, and that clone will have Culling Strike on it. So the clone will actually shoot arrows when we Blink Arrow, and whenever you are facing a boss and the boss has 10%, you just Blink Arrow once, and this clone will shoot 1 arrow at the boss, and it will get instantly killed due to Culling Strike that kills enemies that have 10% life or lower when hit by supported skills, aka hit by our Blink Arrow. I'm also using Herald of Ice, Curse on hit, Projectile Weakness, and added cold damage. Now what this does is that every time Herald of Ice hits a target or an enemy, it will curse on hit, aka it will curse them with projectile weakness, which means that the enemy will take increased damage from projectiles, aka all the damage that we do. I also have it added with cold damage support as well, because Herald of Ice actually does damage, and it does increase damage when I have added cold damage support to it. But do keep in mind that this makes the Herald of Ice mana reserve to increase to 32% instead of 25%. But that's not a problem for me. I still have a decent mana pool. I can shoot a couple of elemental hits and be fine. And do keep in mind that the build has a lot of mana leech, so you just have to hit one mob once and you're gonna have full mana sustain constantly. So it's not a problem that we have a very low mana pool. And then last but not least, I have Precision and Hatred as my last 2 auras, so I'm using Precision, Herald of Ice, and Hatred. Precision is at level 1 just for the accuracy and the increased cool strike chance. There's no need to level this up further, and if you do level it up further, you will get an even lowered mana pool, which will make you struggle with this build. And last but not least, I'm also using a 5 link, but this is not needed to use a 5 link in your Hero's Ire. That just makes it more expensive. I was lucky enough to easily get a hold of a Hero's Ire, so I said, whatever, I can go with it. So I'm using Shrapnel Ballista, added cold, elemental damage with attacks, ice bite, and faster attacks. You could probably throw in something like hypothermia here instead, or instead of ice bite. But yeah, this is just a supportive ballista that I use for a single target. I just put 3 ballistas up and they're going to do damage to the mob, whatever boss I'm attacking, and I just shoot there and I just stand there and just shoot at it while the ballistas does it work. Now the thing is that ballistas actually do very, very much damage, so I suggest using at least a 4 link with Shrapnel Ballista for killing stronger single target mobs. Now, if you would like to have a 6 link, if you can afford it, for like your Hope Shredder or your Hero's Ire, I would suggest that you keep the cold penetration support in at all times and then use GMP for map clearing as a 6 link like this. But you would gem swap greater multiple projectiles for either slower projectiles, faster attacks, or ice bite. Faster attacks and slower projectiles basically are the same DPS, it just depends on what playstyle you want. If you want the faster playstyle with faster attacks. And you could also go Ice Bite, because Ice Bite is just a lot of flat damage, but I do suggest slow projectiles or faster attacks because that is probably the most DPS increase they can use in a 6 link with cold penetration. And as I said, swap out GMP, put in faster attacks, slow projectiles, and you're gonna have a much easier and better time with bosses. That actually, that last 6 link on this build actually pushes the DPS by over 1 million DPS extra, I believe. Now, as soon as you finish off Hillock, go into the town, and you're gonna want to pick up Caustic Arrow Gem as your leveling gem to begin with. Now, for the beginning, you want to use Caustic Arrow, and you want to use it along with Pierce. Caustic Arrow is great for leveling early on, as it scales very good off of nothing basically. It just does a ton of chaos damage per second off the ground, and it's easy to just hit a mob, make it die by the Caustic Arrow, and you can keep on running. Now, as soon as you pick up the medicine chest of the Tidal Island, go back to Nessa and choose Lesser Poison as your support gem and use that instead of Pierce. Caustic Arrow and Lesser Poison work very well together, and if you're lucky enough at this point to pick up a 3 link that are all green gems, I would also suggest that you buy a volley support and use that along with those 3 gems to increase the AoE of your Caustic Arrow by shooting 3 arrows instead of 1. Now, there is also a small trick that you can do if you're new in the league or you're new to the game or anything and you want to speed up your leveling process. Talk to Tarkley after every level, and you can look for boots like this that he sells, but in some situations he might sell a pair of boots with movement speed. So I suggest that unless you already have a pair of movement speed boots, you should sometimes go to Tarkley after leveling, search for movement, and look if you have any movement speed boots that you can pick up for purchase that you can use. Movement speed boots increase your speed through the acts very much, and you should always look to have as high movement speed boots as possible. Now remember also, after entering the submerged passage, go back to town and also pick up the dash gem and use that as a movement skill, because dash kind of dashes your character forward and it can help you just run through the acts much faster as well. Remember also to pick up the Shrapnel Ballista and use that in just any gem slot at all that you have is green, and use it to help you kill stronger rare mobs or kill bosses overall as well, because the shrapnel ballista is a very strong single target in terms of helping your single target DPS by shooting caustic arrows and putting up shrapnel ballistas around the mob. Now, as soon as you enter Act 2, actually go back to Act 1 and talk to Nessa again, and she will reward you with some new set of gems for killing Marvale. And I would suggest at this point that you pick up Toxic Rain and level with that instead, along with Onslaught and Mirage Archer. Now, Onslaught gives you Onslaught every time you hit a unique enemy, or you have a chance to get it when you deal a killing blow to any sort of mobs. So while you're leveling, you're just dropping Toxic Rains upon mobs. Onslaught will perk for you, and Onslaught gives you movement speed and attack speed. And Mirage Archer will keep shooting arrows even though you're not shooting, so you just drop a quick 1 or 2 Toxic Rains on the mobs. If they die, you might proc Onslaught, and Mirage Archer will also proc, and it will start shooting more of your Toxic Rains upon mobs around the area, which will then keep on proccing Onslaught. Now, also remember while you're questing in Act 2 that when Groist gives you a quest reward, that you pick up the Herald of Ice Gem and start using it and start leveling it. Now, Herald of Ice doesn't really do much with Toxic Rain, but Herald of Ice will be needed for later on in the build, and you might as well start leveling it. As soon as we hit Act 3, we actually once again go back to Act 1 and now swap out Toxic Rain and the current support gems that we have, and we instead will start playing Rain of Arrows. Now, Rain of Arrows basically work the same as Toxic Rain, instead that it does more of our base damage, and it doesn't really do any chaos damage, or it doesn't really put any spores on the ground after we drop the arrows overall. But Rain of Arrows is really good for leveling with our build, because we're going to add a ton of flat elemental damage along with it. So what you also do is that you pick up added cooldown support, keep Mirage Archer, and if you at this point have been lucky enough to find a 4th link, perhaps with a red 4th link, you can also use added fire damage as well. As I said, any form of flat damage is great for this build, and we're going to use added fire damage for this particular situation. Once you hit Act 4, it's pretty straightforward. We're going to keep the gem setup that we have, and we're going to keep going like that until we hit Act 5. And as soon as we hit Act 5, we're going to swap out added fire damage, and we're instead going to use increased critical strikes support, because added fire damage scales a lot from our physical damage overall. But depending on what weapon you're using, you might not really have that much physical damage. And at this point, we're starting to pick up quite a few critical strike support, critical strike chance and crit multi things in our skill tree. So we scale very good of critical strikes, and we're going to start using that instead of the fire damage. Especially if you are using a Quill Rain, this is very needed, because the Quill Rain has so little physical damage at this point that the added fire damage isn't really doing much for us. Now, as soon as you finish Act 5 and you get to Act 6, we're basically going to keep doing what we already have been doing at this point. We're going to keep that 4 link. If you can find any form of a 5 link where you can upgrade, then basically add maybe Ice Bite at this point, because you will have that available, and Ice Bite is really good for leveling at this stage. Gives a lot of flat damage, as I said. And remember to do your normal labyrinth as soon as you hit Act 4. Basically, I would suggest that you do your normal labyrinth. After you hit Act 8, you want to do your second labyrinth as well, to keep pushing your ascendancies, which helps you progress through the acts a lot. And also, if you're using a tabula at all through the leveling stage, I would suggest a little bit different setup for these these gems and all the things that you're leveling with. All the tabula gems can be found within the guide on the forum under each act in the leveling guide. So check that out for what uniques are good to use, and check out what gems you kind of want to use if you're using a tabula, instead of maybe this is like your first character or it's a new league and you don't really have a lot to go with, which I explained what I suggest that you should be using at this point for leveling. Now, this is the first part of the skill tree that you should be aiming for around when you finish Act 1 and you kill Merveil. The reason why we go evasion in life is because it's very nice to have a lot of evasion, and you need some form of life during your leveling progression as well. A lot of people just neglect life altogether, even through the leveling stages, just because you're playing softcore, but it will greatly just make it more difficult for you during the leveling stages, because you can get one shot through a lot of things. There's a lot of stun involved once you get into like Act 4 and stuff like that. So adding a decent amount of life during the leveling progress as well is never bad. Now we also go Heart of Oak for life regeneration, which is nice while leveling, added life, chance to avoid being stunned, such things. We also get some movement speed here, and we also get some movement speed here. Ballistic Mastery gives us a lot of damage, and then we start going for Aspect of the Eagle because it gives damage, accuracy, life, and more movement speed. And as I said previously, movement speed can help us progress through the acts a lot. So we're definitely going to be going for a lot of movement speed during this leveling progression overall. Now, this is how the leveling tree looks around at the end of Act 2. We have now gone all the way down to Aspect of the Lynx for more movement speed, crit chance, attack damage, and some nice added intelligence there as well. And along the way we get attack speed, crit chance with bow, and some damage. We also then go down and pick up Quick Step for more movement speed once again, and some decent attack speed. We'll also make our way down to Fleetfoot, mostly for the movement speed. But also Fleetfoot increases attack speed every time we use a movement skill, and it increases cooldown recovery speed of movement skills as well, so we can use Dash even more, which makes us run through the acts even faster, and every time we do use Dash, we actually gain attack speed, so we gain more damage. Now, this is basically what the skill tree looks like after you finish Act 3 and you are around level 23. This time we have gone over and gotten thick skin due to all the life here. As I said earlier, life is important while you level, even though some people might neglect it. We've also gone over to the right side and started getting some weapon elemental damage, because we are using a lot of elemental damage already from added cold damage, and we might still be using the added fire damage before we start swapping over to increased critical strikes later on. So this gives us a lot of damage increase currently, and will be very nice for leveling as well. Now, I also have taken Mana Leech here, because one thing that you struggle with heavily while leveling is being able to keep up your mana. You're still probably going to be forced to use a mana flask, but I still like going for Mana Leech, and the more levels we get, the more damage we do, and the better Mana Leech start to feel as well. So in the early acts you might not really notice this too much, but later on you're going to start noticing that these do a lot for you. Also, we go for Herbalism up here, more life and flask recovery rate, and just more life recovered from flask as well. So it's very nice to get Herbalism, because we're making our way up in the skill tree anyway. Once you finish Act 3 and you enter Act 4 around level 33, we will then have also added the Winter Spirit, which adds cold damage, physical damage converted to cold damage, and increased cold damage with attack skills, which is very good for us, and Winter Spirit itself, which is 20% of physical damage converted to cold damage, and 16% increased cold damage with attack skills. Our build mainly evolves around cold damage and converting physical over to cold damage, and this, along with Rain of Arrows and added cold damage in our gem setup, is going to be a nice DPS boost. Along with that, we've also gone for the King of the Hill, which adds a lot of crit along the way, more damage overall, and also gives us knockback once we get King of the Hill, which can feel kind of nice sometimes for leveling as you're knocking mobs back away from your vicinity, so you might not take that many hits overall from mobs as well. Now, as you enter Act 5, we go up and we get more critical strike chance here and Heartseeker for a nice DPS boost. We've also gone ahead and gotten Acrobatics. Acrobatics removes a lot of our armor and energy shield, but we don't really have any armor and we don't really have any energy shield as well, usually when you play a ranger, and especially not for this build. But what this adds is that you get a great amount of dodge attack hits chance, and it will just feel very nice that you can run through a lot of mobs without even getting hit at all, because Acrobatics just makes us so evasive, or yeah, whatever the word is. Yeah, you're just gonna dodge a lot of attack hits and it's gonna feel very nice. Along with that, we also went for Master Fletcher for more damage and attack speed as well. And here we also have the skill tree that you want to go for after finishing Act 5 basically. After this, you're gonna want to continue and progress through the remaining part of the skill tree that will also be listed here and in Path of Building, but we're focusing on finishing up Act 5 now. So what I've gone ahead and done is that I've gone down here and I've gotten Fangs of Frost. Now Fangs of Frost adds more cold damage with attack skills and also penetrate cold resistances against our mobs, more cold damage with attack skills as well, and increased effect of chill, because we're starting to do some decent damage, and along with everything that we have, we are starting to chill quite a bit as well. I've also gone up and gotten the Jewel Socket, and I got Forces of Nature here, I got Revenge of the Hunted, I've gone all the way up and got Soul Raker, we've gotten some Frenzy Charges, some more life over here with Blood Drinker, and another Frenzy Charge here as well. Now you could definitely also go for this Jewel Socket here and see how that feels. Now do keep in mind, this is basically the remaining skill tree for leveling through the last remaining acts. This is not something that you should be focusing on getting at the end of Act 6 or whatever, because these are a lot of skill points that I've added here. This is basically between you being in the stage that you're in right now and the finished skill tree. Because this might be around you hit level, I don't know, 70 or something, or maybe closer to 80. And then after that, you just want to look at the complete skill tree and you want to start adding whatever you have there. And do keep in mind as well, for the finished skill tree, you are going to start removing some of the nodes that we were just using to enhance our leveling speed and our leveling progression. Now here we just have a quick look at the Path of Building and everything that I've gone for in the Path of Building, everything that I have, everything set up and stuff like that. Just a quick look at the finished build in POB. There's also a link to the Path of Building within this guide. And the link to the Path of Building will also be linked down below in the description. So, you know, pretty general, I guess, ranger stuff we have around here. I went for these ones instead of these ones up here. I want this for more chance to free shock and ignite because of our Yoke of the Suffering and our taming basically is the reason why I went for that. We have Flash of Freeze and Wind Spirit, you know, damage, Fangs of the Frost, life, lethality, damage, using the Intuitive Spirit, Intuitive Leap, Survivalist, Heartseeker, Acuity, Herbalist are much easier to get a hold of there and we're saving up a lot of skill points. Master Fletcher, King of the Hill, From the Shadows, Soul Raker with our Line Ice Fall, go all the way to Face Acrobatics for that juicy dodge spell hit as well, along with all the attack and spell dodge that we have within Way the Poacher, Avatar the Slaughter, Quartz Infusion, Avatar the Veil, and all that evasion that we have as well. Forces of Nature for, you know, a lot of damage by penetrating more cold resistances and elemental damage with attack skills. Revenge of the Hunted and all these life nodes to get a little bit tankier and get more evasion. Combat Focus Jewel over here to remove the fire that we're using. Frenzy charge obviously, because we do focus heavily on frenzy charges here. Another jewel that is very needed to remove the lightning. Resourcefulness, I guess this isn't really a must, these two nodes here. I just want them for some extra resistance, some nice life and stuff like that. I also went for lethal assault this way up here for the damage. Cold-hearted calculation, damage, intelligence. Obviously assassination is great, and so is trickery for this as well. More life, and then coordination is just so much attack speed and intelligence as well, which all rangers struggle with for just one skill point, so pretty obvious to go there as well. What was I thinking about? Yes, you might wonder about savagery. Now, I can't really get a hold of savagery because it's so far away and we're starting to lose skill points here. You possibly could go over there if you level up even further, but then again, is it worth it to go there for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 skill points, level 96? I mean, like, that seems like a lot just to get one more, which is good for a build, but I mean, like, do you really care that much? Now, you could anoint savagery if you really want to, but it's expensive to anoint on your amulet, and I personally just anointed True Strike because it wasn't really that expensive and it gives a lot of damage. And yeah, skills, we have, you know, elemental hit here. I'm showing this, it's a 5 link currently, and I'm showing off here the increased damage of slow projectiles. As you can see, that's a pretty heavy damage boost. So is faster attacks and stuff like that. But yeah, we're obviously using GMP. And Mirage Archer isn't really being calculated properly in Path of Building. That's why it says that the damage numbers are so low, but Mirage Archer does an insane amount of DPS. So yeah, Greater Multiple and Mirage Archer, along with Hypothermia, elemental damage with attacks, is the 5 link that I'm using. And as soon as we're doing bosses, we swap off GMP and we add Cold Penetration, and we have a ton of damage. Like, you see it says 2.1, and it's not even calculating Mirage Archer properly, so we have a lot more damage than that. And if we would be able to add our 6th link, we have Slow Projectiles, which gives us 2.8, and Mirage Archer, once again, not being calculated properly. Just a configuration quickly to show you that there's no funny business going on here. A lot of people who make builds, they just check every box here and being like, oh, I have the biggest DPS in the world, I'm the strongest person, oh, yada yada yada. I have shocked, ticked, but shocked calculates really bad in Path of Building because I think most of the time it calculates the max amount of shock that you can have. Now, I don't really know how to check the max amount of shock that we have, but I still have a tick because we can shock. Obviously, we freeze a lot, we chill a lot, we do ignite with everything that we have in this build. So I kept those ticked. You know, this doesn't really add incredibly amount of DPS. You know, but yeah, it adds a fair amount of DPS. The shock one is the big one, as you can see here. But we do shock, it just depends on how much. We have frenzy charges, we have phasing. Phasing doesn't really do anything anyway. Flask is active, but I already have that checked in. All these boxes here. And I haven't really checked anything else. I mean, like, there probably are things here that I might have missed or whatever. I don't really think so, but yeah, there you have it. And yeah, total DPS still shows very strong with the 6th link that I have ticked in now with Mirage Archer that doesn't calculate for shit. And these are now with 2020 gems. I don't have 2020 gems on my character, just saying, but yeah, this is basically how it's gonna look with 2020 gems. So I'm not going for these 21 everything, look at my DPS. 2020 is something understandable that everyone can achieve. And as I said, this is mainly a budget build. I'm not taking in 21 on everything like some other people do. And yeah, that's basically it, I would say. Not really much left to say. Thank you very much for watching. Please perhaps leave a comment on the thread as well and say what you think about the build, if you are trying it out, if you enjoy it, if there is anything you think I should change for an improvement of the build. And yeah, once again, thank you so much for watching this video as well. feel free to go and subscribe to my YouTube. Go follow my Twitch as well over at twitch.tv/burgerbrush, where I stream almost daily and where you can contact me about either this build or anything else that I'm doing. And thank you very much, and I'll see you around.